Recording in progress. So welcome everybody to lecture 4. Today we're going to be working with rendering sequences for animation. So for you today, for your viewing and dining pleasure, we have the Cornell rabbit or the still life. So basically your project 3 still life or rabbit becomes project 4. And we've also got, that's for Arnold rendering. And we've also got an Unreal Engine 4.25.4 animation for you to do. Now you must use 4.25.4 of Unreal Engine because that is the approved version that everybody has. Nelson, please put your mask on. You shouldn't even be in the building without it. Okay, if you need one also, they're in the receptionists. All right, so Unreal 4.25.4 is what you need. Like I said, that is the approved version for both game art and computer animation. So for that, we have a project built for you already. All you need to do is open it up in Unreal, do a few steps in there to kind of get used to working with the sequencer, which is how you basically make animation in Unreal, which you guys have probably already done if you're doing Portfolio 2. I think you guys go into Unreal. I don't know if you've been in there yet. But you wind up using that, and we're going to be outputting it a little bit differently than you've probably output things before in Unreal. There's a couple of ways you can do a camera capture, which is basically kind of like a low-res play blast, or you can send it to the render queue, which is what we're going to do. So we can get a higher quality render. All right, so for project 3, either the rabbit or the still life, we provide you with an animated camera that you will import into your scene file. Now, I recommend that you take your project 3 Maya project folder, copy it, paste it to a new location, and change it to project 4, right? Project 3, copy, paste to a new location, make it 4. This way you've got a copy, and if anything happens, it doesn't delete or ruin your original project 3. So this way we've got backups if you need it. So basically it's very simple. We've got a scene file you're going to import. It contains a camera only. It's going to be based on your lighting that you did for the still life or the rabbit. You're going to bring that in. We're going to set it up in Arnold. You're going to render it out. This is the most time-intensive part of the exercise. This can take between 4 and 12 hours, depending on what your settings are. So most people are completely unprepared for that, because they go, oh yeah, I'll knock this right out. Especially when you do Unreal and you realize doing it in real time is way faster than doing it in software. Now, the results are a little bit different. We do get a little cleaner, more finished look in software rendering, mostly because we're not doing any ray tracing in Unreal. First, because the graphics cards we have don't handle real-time ray tracing. And second, because it's really not that necessary for you, especially if you're an animator and you want to get something quick out. The real-time render process that we're going to do is actually fairly quick. So I'd say the rabbit in Unreal probably should take an hour, maybe 2, depending on how long you take. Like if you take your time, very thorough, go through everything step by step, it might take you an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, tops. All right, but like I said, think of your render times for the rabbit. They're usually somewhere between 1.5 minutes and 3 minutes for project 3. Multiply that by 70 frames. So, in fact, let's just do that for fun. Why? Because we have a calculator. And I don't have to do it in my head. All right, so we take 70 frames, multiply it by 3 minutes, comes out to 210 minutes, divide that by 60 minutes per hour, and that's roughly 3.5 hours. And that doesn't include the time that possibly Maya crashed on you in the middle of it. Now, the good news is if Maya crashes on you in the middle of a sequence render, you can just stop, set it up to pick up where it left off. You don't have to restart all over, right? So when we go and we do this in Arnold, we're going to be setting up a frame range, like frame 1 to frame 70. If it crashes at frame 10 and frame 10 is no good, well, guess what? You go and you set your bottom frame range from start at 10, then go to 70. If it crashes again after 8, 9, 10 frames, then cut your range down smaller. Do like 10 to 18 or 10 to 20. Just cut it down so it doesn't crash. Now, it depends on how much room you've got on your computer, because we're going to have at least a couple of, we're going to have about 400 or 500 megabytes worth of information when we get done between Unreal and Arnold. All right, does that make sense? Questions? Julio, any questions?
No, sir.
Okay, cool. All right, so I've only got about an hour and a half or so of actual lecture because I want to demo everything, walk through it, talk you guys through why we're doing stuff the way we do it, how it works. And then pretty much you're going to be doing as much as you can in the remaining part of lecture. We're going to treat it like a lab. And then hopefully you guys can wrap it up when you have lab this afternoon with Frank and Ari. Because honestly, you probably can get the whole thing done. You might have a little bit of, a few frames extra or something to do, but you can get the bulk of it done. So we're going to do Unreal first, and then we're going to do Arnold second. I always recommend you start with Unreal. It's real quick. It's an easy get, and it gives you a sense of accomplishment. All right, so office hours, I'll have them tomorrow from 10 to 4 Eastern Standard Time. Frank or Ari will be running the open lab from 1 to 5 Eastern Standard. And that, again, is for campus and online students both. All right, so campus etiquette, make sure that you maintain at least 3 feet between your fellow students at all times. Make sure you wear masks all the time in all indoor environments at Full Sail, please. Especially in classrooms. So I recommend spray down your workstations before you start. When you're done, please spray them down again. If you are sick, do not come to campus. Stay home. You can come to Zoom. We'll give you credit for it. It's not a big deal. But to be healthy and make everybody else or keep everybody else healthy, please stay home. No headphones, earbuds during lecture, unless of course you are using them to listen to audio. Phones on silent, please. I already checked mine. So it's good to go. All right, so the animation project will be due tomorrow night before midnight, September 9th. The instructions are inside the activity. They are PDFs. We've got instructions for, any of the three that you're doing. We're going to go over it. It's a good resource to have, not only for this assignment, but in future, if you want to render stuff out. Whether it happens to be in Maya or you want to do it in Unreal and you want to do frames rather than just a play blast type movie. All right, so as I mentioned, the Cornell rabbit, very simple kind of orbit. Notice that the very last frame shows up to be the composition from project 3. So again, it's a very, very simple 70 frame orbit. Good, thank you. All right, so we're going to use the lighting from project 3. Like I said, I recommend you take the project 3 Maya project folder, duplicate it, or copy it, paste it into a new location, rename it to project 4. You're going to need to download the Cornell Rabbit anim rendercam.maya. It's a zip file. It's basically a scene file that contains only an animated camera. I've got a reference movie. There's a reference movie on FSO, but if you want to have it downloaded in case you worry about internet, you can certainly do that, and definitely use the Cornell Rabbit doc that we have. Now, you can also download that doc as a PDF. So you can work offline if needed. All right, so same thing for the still life. We've got a camera file, got a reference movie, we've got a separate doc for it, and then this one is kind of a same, kind of a very simple, like mild orbit with a kind of a truck in, where the camera moves in to rest on the final composition. And now we get into Unreal. We provide you with an Unreal project folder. If any of you are familiar with Unreal projects, you know they can be massive. Right? The like average ones you get from Unreal are like 9 gigabytes. Okay, this is severely stripped down to 70 meg. Everything that could be removed, we removed. It's bare bones, but it is a valid project. However, you will be increasing the size of it with your render frame. We're going to be outputting EXR files out of Unreal, just like we do out of Arnold and Maya. So we've got an Unreal project zip folder. We've got a reference movie if you need it. It's basically the rabbit spontaneously combusting and melting. It's so pathetic the way the one ear stands up. So if anybody's interested in visual effects, Ari, who helps out, is a visual effects instructor. So if you're interested in visual effects, whether it's Unreal or in Maya and Houdini, she's the person to talk to. And we've also got the Unreal docs. All right, so any questions? That's just kind of a brief overview. Basically, what we're going to do is I'm going to demo Unreal first. Then I'll let you guys decide which Maya, Arnold we should do, whether it's the rabbit or the still life. I'll kind of demo that. I am not going to have you guys wait around for me to render 70 frames at 3 minutes a frame. So I've got frames already rendered for either one. It doesn't matter, but I will show you the workflow in putting them together. Couple of crucial points. For this, you must have Adobe After Effects downloaded. You will need that. We're making movies for both of them out of Unreal and out of Maya using After Effects. So I recommend get the latest version out of the Creative Cloud. I updated mine yesterday, made sure it worked. Hopefully it still works. And we'll get started. All right. So let me give you kind of a brief tour inside FSO here, so you guys can get an idea of what we're dealing with. All right, so like I said, the Arnold, I have between 4 and 5 hours there of rendering, between 2 and 4 hours to wrap up. So like I said, allocate 6 hours and hope for the best. You can probably do it in less, but I just don't want you guys to undershoot the time, because that always happens. Underestimating the first time you try and do something like this. All right, so for the instructions, like I said, you choose one, either the rabbit or the still life for Arnold. Here are the docs. You click inside here, they go through step by step what you're going to do. And this little blue note here, if Maya's crashing, just cut your frame ranges down to a smaller chunk. It'll make a lot more sense when we get into do it. I've got all of the processes here. Now, unlike rendering out single frames, where Arnold's got the denoiser built into the render view, Arnold does not have a image sequence denoiser that runs automatically. It's a separate application you have to run after all the frames are rendered. And I'll show you that process too, because it's really not that bad, but it is a separate program to run. It's basically the Arnold denoiser. So we run that, we'll get our denoised frames, and those frames are what we take into After Effects. So we've got the workflow for After Effects also. The nice thing is, if you set your scene file up, your project up correctly in Unreal, it will have frame numbers on each frame. And After Effects understands what to do if it sees a file name with a whole bunch of different numbers. It assumes, oh, it's an image sequence, and it will import the whole chunk for you automatically. We're basically going to be putting a watermark on top of the movie, very similar to what we did in Photoshop. I have no template here, so you're going to be doing all of this from scratch. And like I said, it's really not that hard to do, and it's something that you should know how to do in future classes if you want to make movies. Now, you may wind up using Final Cut Pro, you may wind up using Premiere Pro, but After Effects is really good for throwing stuff together pretty quick. All right, so same kind of deal with the still life. Basically, it's the same workflow as the rabbit. Obviously, you're doing the still life instead of the rabbit. The Unreal Engine, this kind of takes you through going into the launcher, launching the correct engine, opening up, because a lot of times in Unreal, we're used to seeing our Unreal project pop up in that first window. This goes under the assumption you've downloaded something from somebody else, and how do I navigate to find that manually? Which is not very difficult at all. Got a separate level set up. Basically got a camera set up. I'm going to show you how to actually lock the camera. That's something else that's pretty valuable in Unreal if you're doing animation, because you may work from perspective, but may have a cinematic camera set up for rendering. You want to lock that. so that it doesn't move unintentionally, unless, of course, your camera is animated, which is entirely possible. So this is going to be looking at Unreal from the perspective of creating some virtual production piece, not necessarily being an interactive game. You guys will get that in your gaming classes, but this is something that is being widely used for virtual production. All right, so got a bunch of stuff. It all looks pretty foreign. It's really not too bad. A lot of the things in Unreal are very similar to Maya, like the world outliner, similar to Maya's outliner. The render queue is pretty similar to batch rendering when it works in Maya. And the reason we don't use batch rendering in Maya with Arnold is because that is reserved for the commercial version of Arnold. The free student version does not have batch rendering. And even Arnold acknowledges that in their help docs, but they recommend doing what we're going to do, which is using the render sequence feature inside Maya's render view, not Arnold. So maybe a little strange, but it all works. All goes according to the evil plan. All right, so first thing I want to do is let's go take a look at what we have here. So you will have to turn in not only the movie, but also the Maya scene file for either the Cornell Rabbit or the still life. They are both graded. I open up each scene file just to verify all the settings were done properly. And then the movie will tell me if it was rendered properly and assembled properly in After Effects. Unreal, you're going to be turning the project back into me. I will open up the project to make sure you saved all the appropriate things you were supposed to save in the project. And also, obviously, the render. So don't discard anything, please. All right, so we have a folder of what the deliverables look like. Your Unreal project, that's obviously going to have your movie in it. It's also going to have your project and the main folder. Unlike other turn-ins for us, you don't want to rename the Unreal project. Leave it at the default name, which is basically going to be this. Because believe it or not, that file name is used when you launch Unreal. That project file is really not like a Maya scene file. It's just a bunch of pointers pointing to different folders, different locations after it launches the Unreal editor. All right, so here are all your downloads. The reference movie, which is right here. If you need, download it. It's not required, but the bunny burn, you definitely want to download that. bburn, new file, Unreal project. There we go. Like I said, it does download fairly quickly. And, oh, okay. Well, 88 megabytes. All right, now, just like Maya, you really have to launch Unreal first and then open the project. You just can't double click on the Unreal project and have it launch. So let's go in and work with the instructions. Like I said, if you want to, you can download the instructions. Just hit download, it'll download the PDF for you. All right, so we downloaded it, we uncompressed it. You can place it in your Unreal folder. Like I said, I'm going to leave it in my downloads to show you guys how to navigate outside of Unreal's little world. So we're going to launch Unreal, basically the Epic launcher. And hopefully that goes according to plan. Now, A couple of quick notes. Try not to have too many things open at once. Maya's a memory hog. After Effects is a memory hog. Photoshop's a memory hog. Unreal's a big memory hog. So when I bounce between programs, I got to quit out of everything because I'm trying to stream and record at the same time. So for me, it's the kiss of death if I try and have too much open. But for you guys, you might not have that restriction, but everything works faster the more memory you have. So keep your open apps to a bare minimum of stuff you really need. All right, so you're going to want to head over to the library. You can see here I've got Unreal 4.25.4. If you don't have that, you want to add an engine version, and you can select any version you want from here. Now, we have not tested 4.27. We did test 4.26, tended to make everything crash a little too much. So GameArt said, nope, let's just stick with 5. All right, so you can get rid of a version if you want, just delete it. You can also come down here and remove it. So what I'm going to do is launch 4.25.4. So it's going to bring me to select or create a new project. And since I do not have this sitting in my happy little Unreal folder on my computer in Documents, just click the More button. And here, Open Existing Project, click Browse, because you want to look on your computer. And then just go to Downloads. There's an Unreal Project folder. There's my Unreal Project file. So I click Open, and then the editor is going to go away and think about it for a while and try to open it up. All right, let me kind of move some of this stuff out of the way here. All right, so go back, take a look. We did all this. We are right here. And we want to open up the new Bunny Burn level, which is right here. Just double click on it. There it is. You can see really far away. Oh, compiling shaders. How lovely. All right, so we've done that. We've got this. Now, we want to select in the viewport, which is right up here. We want to select the Cine Camera Actor. And that will zoom into the close-up camera that I have set up for rendering. Now, to lock this and so it doesn't accidentally get moved, all you have to do is go into the World Outliner here, click on the camera, right-click on it, go down to Transform, and of course, everything is hidden. So let's go back. Let's move that out of the way. So right-click, Transform, Lock Actor Movement. So that means the camera is locked. I can no longer move it around. Just there is a nice little safeguard. All right, so we locked it. Now what we're going to do is we're going to select the level sequence, which is Bunny Burn level sequence. Go down under General and Open Level Sequence. and it should open. There we go. So I have mine unpinned from my window, my main window. And basically, this is where all the animation happened. Very similar to the timeline in Maya, but it shows you stacks and it shows you layers. Now, inside here, there's really not a ton of stuff to do. What you want to do is you want to go to the playback options, which is this right here. Click on it, and you can see the start and the end frame. That's what we want to set. So we want the start and end to be, start to be 0, end to be 70. So right here, 0. If you hit tab, you go to 70, hit enter.
Professor, did I lose you?
I'm here. I don't know what happened. It looks like maybe we lost internet briefly. Can you hear me?
I don't have access. I don't view what you're viewing. All I see is your face.
Okay, hang on a second. Let me so yep, it looks like we did actually lose internet briefly. You got it back?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, well, I'm glad you told me. All right. So, yes. See, we have trouble with Wi-Fi at full sail too. All right, so we are recording, which is good. Let's see. Open up the chat, participants, everybody back in. Looks like it. Okay. So let me hit play again because that seems to have set everything in a tizzy. So I'm just checking my playback range, start at 0, end at 70. That's good. Let's hit play. There we go. Okay, good. All right, now, the next thing we want to do is make sure we save that playback range. Let's go back to Unreal. There we go. So to save it, it's right here, this little icon of a disk. If you've made changes, the little asterisk pops up. So you want to hit that to save it. This way, when I open up your project folder, check your sequencer, I can see that you've got the right frame range. All right, so part 1 done. Let's go back and take a look at what's next. So now we want to bring up the movie render queue. That can be found under the Windows menu inside Unreal. So Window, under Cinematics, Movie Render Queue. So right now we have nothing in the render queue until we add render. So up here in the upper left corner, there's a plus sign with a green render. And basically we've only got one sequence in here, so you select the sequence. We also have no configured settings. So we need to set everything up. Now, this is a lot like the render settings in Maya, except we can create custom things. So let's see what we need to do. All right, so we did all this. We basically want to add anti-aliasing, high resolution, and the EXR sequence file type. So to do that, we come under setting, want anti-aliasing, we want high resolution, and we want to add in EXR. Now, this part's important. You want to make sure you turn off JPEG, because if you don't, you're going to wind up with a set of EXRs and a set of JPEGs. You don't want them. JPEGs, garbage. All right, so that takes care of part of our render settings. Now we need to go down under output. This is where you want to change the output resolution. By default, it wants to give you basically an HD file size, which is 1920 by 1080. We're going to be doing the typical file size that we do in Maya, which is 960 by 540, smaller HD. There is no preset, so we want to come in here and change it. 960 by 540. We want to use the custom frame rate. By default, Unreal wants to render everything at 24 frames a second, which is old school movie quality. We're doing video, which is a higher frame rate. So turn on custom frame rate, come down, go to 30. So far, pretty simple. Next, we want to go down under frames, which is here. So we don't care about the handle frame count. Don't care about the output step. The output step, we do want at 1. That means it renders every frame and doesn't skip it. If you're trying to do stop motion, maybe set it up to render every 2 frames or every 4 frames to get that stop motion feel. We want to use custom playback range. So we're going to start at frame 0, and we want to end at frame 70. Now, under this, we want to save as a preset. So you want to give it your name. Save it as a preset, hit accept. And now when I come in and I take a look at your movie render queue, I can open this up and I can see, okay, you got EXR, you got anti-aliasing. How about under here? You got all the settings saved. That's good. Makes sense so far? So all that's here. The next thing we want to do is render, and you want to render local. We're not using a server somewhere in some remote location, unless of course you're home and you've got like, 15 servers at home and you want to use them. Great, go ahead. Can't help you set it up, but have at it. So when you hit the render button, it will bring up a preview for you. It'll go through, render the frames. When this disappears, you are done. So like I said, very fast. But you just wrote like almost a half a gig of information. So when you are done, you've already hit the render button. You can close this. This part's really important. You have to go under File and Save All. This will save all the settings that you did inside. It'll save that sequence, frame range, and it'll also save the movie render queue settings. Save all. Once you've done that, you should be able to quit out. Now, where do the frames go? Okay, the frames go back into the Unreal project folder. They go to the saved folder and under movie renders. All right, so mine didn't render out. For some reason, mine started at frame 19. So this is a really good example of why you want to save everything in Unreal, because now I can go back in and I can redo this. So let me get rid of all these nasty frames. And let's do it again. So all my settings should be set up already, but I'm going to go back and verify them. So let's go find our project folder, just like we did before. There it is. Well, let me just go to downloads. Yes, good. Say again? No. But it's a good chance to find out what would happen. Because if it happened to me, I mean, it could easily happen to anybody. So it's probably something I didn't pay attention to that I should have. So let's load in. And let's go to the cinematic camera. So it's still locked. That's very good. So let's go to the level sequence and check out our start and end frame range. So start and end, 0 and 70. So far, so good. Let's go check these settings right here. So let's go back to Windows Cinematic Movie Render Queue. All right, so I'm going to go back, add in my sequencer. Open up my sequencer, or I should say open up my level sequence, and then I should be able to go to presets and turn my presets on. All right, so that's good, that's good, that's good. Let's go output here. Custom start frame at 0 and at 70. Okay. Custom playback is good. Everything looks good. Let's see what happened. Let's hit accept. Let's render. All right, let's close this. Before I quit out of Unreal, let me go check and see if my frames worked. All right, so it still did not work. I'm still missing frames. In the window? Okay, so now I have to figure out why it said that. Good catch. So let me get rid of these. And let me close this. I don't want to save anything. Don't save. All right, well, let's try this again. Oh, there we go. It crashed. Awesome. What do we got going on here? So I think what I'm going to do is start again. Let me get rid of this. Let me uncompress a new version of it. There we go. Library version 4.25.4. Let's navigate, hit the more button, come down, hit browse. Go to downloads. Let's open that project up. Let's double click on the sequence. Let's go to the Cine actor. And let's lock it like we did last time. Okay, that should work. Let's open up the level sequence. Let's take our frame range, frame range 0, 0. Let's go 70. All right, that looks like it works. Put that back to 0 just for fun. Let's save. Let's do cinematics. Yes. Okay. This is like the third time I've opened. Okay. Four point two 5.4. All right. So you got the engine launched, or I should say the launcher, and then you open the editor, right? You got that part? So right here, select or create a new project. You want to go more, open existing project. You want to browse. Where do you have your folder? All right, so you took it out of downloads. So go to the desktop and see if it's in there. So when you navigate to the folder, you should be able to click on it, and inside should be the Unreal project. You should be able to click on that project file and hit open. All right, so let's open this up. Let's go to our Cine Actor or Cine Camera Actor. For this time, I think I'm going to not lock it. I'm not going to move it. Let me just see if that did it. All right, so since I'm bypassing the lock part, we're just going to go right to opening the level sequence. So burn level sequence, open level sequence. And don't forget, all these instructions are also in the doc. Step by step. Step by step. All right, well, we'll have to troubleshoot later. All right, so inside here, start range, playback range. Fortunately, that's saved for me. Let's close that. Let's go to cinematics. Under the movie render queue, you want to bring up the level sequence, open it up. Okay, I don't have any presets, so this is where I add in my settings. So I want to add in anti-aliasing, high resolution, and the EXR format, and that is under settings at the top left. So anti-aliasing, high resolution, EXR. You want to disable JPEG. You want to make sure under output, we change our file size, 960, 540 wide, or sorry, that's high. You want to use custom frame That's going to be 30 frames a second. Override existing output. Let's start with frame 1, end with frame 70. So now let's save this as a preset. Hit save, accept. The config should be in there, and let's render. All right, so now, hopefully I got my frames. So that's done. Let me save all. Let's go to my folder, saved movie renders. There we go. So that works. The only difference was I didn't lock the camera. I did it yesterday with the camera locked. It worked. So if it works with the camera locked, great. If not, don't lock the camera. Just make sure you don't move it. All right. So now notice it says frame 1, it only goes to 69. That is a bit of a bug in Unreal, but it's acceptable. It's not 70 frames. We got 69. That's totally fine. That is not worth rerunning again to try and get an extra frame. Happens all the time. All right, so you notice not much happens for the first second, or actually first 3/4 of a second. And then spontaneously bursting into flames. Everybody's favorite part. All right, so now that I've verified that works, I can quit out of Unreal Editor. And I can quit out of the launcher, because that also takes quite a bit of memory too. And now what we want to do is we want to go to After Effects. So make sure you save all before you quit Unreal. We found our movies, or I should say our rendered frames. And now let's launch After Effects. So once After Effects loads, just like every Adobe app, it's going to take you to that little home window and ask you whether you want to create a new project or whether you want to open something. We want to create new project. Now, inside Unreal, inside After Effects, too many afters and uns. Let me make this a little smaller. There we go. So inside After Effects, we want to select the new composition from footage button. What that will do is it will automatically create a composition to the size of our file footage. So it's all 960 by 540. It's 69 frames. It will create a composition using those parameters. So I click on it. Now it's going to ask me, go find your frames. They're in my downloads. Bunny Burn, new, saved, movie renders. All you have to do is select the very first frame. Notice it says format, OpenEXR, import as footage, OpenEXR sequence. That's exactly what I want. Hit open. And now it brought in all my frames. If I want to play it back in After Effects, I can hit the space bar. It'll kind of chug through the first time till it builds a cache file. And then after that, it'll run pretty smooth. So to stop it, just hit space bar again. So at this point, I highly recommend you save your After Effects project. So go File, Save. I like to save it with my frames. This way, they are all in the same location. and it doesn't have to go looking for everything. So under downloads, Bunny Burn folder, it's inside movie renders. Hit save. Now, if anything happens, I've got a project I can just open up again. It'll have all this stuff in there. All right, so After Effects works a little bit like Photoshop. We've got on the left side, we've got it's kind of the same thing as the layer part in Photoshop. This is where you layer video and audio and text and transitions and visual effects that you can do inside here. You can do them all on top or in different layers, and they all respond using blend modes, very similar to the way Photoshop does. What we're interested in doing is going up to the layer menu. We want to go new. We want to create a new text layer. This will basically give us a little insertion point, usually right in the middle of your footage. And you'll see it created a new blank layer here. So I'm just going to type in my name. You want to make sure it's yellow. And to kind of move this around, there's a couple of ways we can do it. Probably one of the easiest ways is to go to the new text layer, and you will see a little arrow pointing right next to that text layer, and you can expand it. What we're interested in is the transform part. You'll notice that there's position. This is X and Y. Nice thing about After Effects is these little blue, they're almost like buttons. They're hot links. If you left click and drag, it'll act like a virtual slider. So I can raise it up and down. I can also scale it. Now I can scale it over here in my character attributes. And down here at the bottom of our transform stack, we've got opacity. You want to make this 15%, just like Photoshop. I can compress that, or not compress it, but collapse that. Let's hit save. And now that I've got that in there, we can actually export this to create a movie. Now, don't be afraid, because in After Effects, we have to export to the render queue and render out those frames into a single movie. So it doesn't take that long. All right, so we want to select the composition, which I've got set up here. We go File, Export, Add to Render Queue. Couple of things that are very important. Down here, next to Output Module, there's a little kind of button link that says Lossless. Click on that, and it will open up the Output Module settings. Okay, so in the Output Module settings, if you are using a PC, you probably have AVI set up here. You need to select QuickTime. You should have QuickTime loaded because it's part of the Adobe package when you download After Effects and Photoshop and anything that uses either making movies or audio. So QuickTime, under Format Options, you want to click on that, and we don't want animation. We want to use Apple's ProRes 422 LT codec. Means it's going to compress it, decompress it for us when we play it back. Now, the reason we're using 422 LT is because it doesn't require a lot of compression, and it's a decent trade-off between quality and file size. Now, when we do the Arnold, we're going to require a little less compression, and the file size is going to be a little bigger, and it's going to be a little more quality. But this, you'll never notice it. So that's why we're using Apple ProRes 422 LT. Settings are right here. Once you're done with that, click OK under the QuickTime options. Output module settings. We don't have audio. You can leave it on, but I like to turn it off. Hit OK. Going to save again. And then you want to make sure you output it to the correct location. Don't trust that After Effects is going to output it where you want it. So this is going to go to downloads. I want it back in with my files here. Let's call this MOV is the file format we want. Click Save. Now we are ready to click the render button all the way over here on the right side. Hit the render button. It's done. Going to save one more time. Let's take a look and see, did it actually save my movie where it was supposed to? Down here at the bottom. There's my movie. Okay. Success. All right, now, one last piece of information you need to have. When you're done, make sure you name your file appropriately. And before you turn in the Unreal, let me pull this out, put the movie there. Before you turn in your Unreal project, take the whole movie renders folder and take it out of the Unreal. You're going to recompress this, and that's what you're going to turn in. Now, the reason you're taking out the movie renders is because I don't need 140 megabytes of files for no reason. If I need to see your frames, I'll just ask. Does that make sense? Questions? Like I said, if you use the doc, go through it, double check everything. Like I said, if you're working through this and you have issues with not getting the right frames, after you've locked the camera, go back, unlock it, try it again, or start over like I had to do. All right, questions? How about out there in the Zoomosphere?
I'm lost on step 22, actually step 21 in the settings window in the presets, click save as preset. I can't find that.
In Unreal, you actually have to click under the presets. Once you've got presets open, it should give you the option to save it. So what you do is inside.
So I did step 20.
Right. So you have the output window open.
Yes.
All right.
I don't
so
see any
you've got all your settings in there, correct?
Yes, sir.
So go to presets. And
Where's
at the very top of presets, there's a button that says save as presets.
Yeah, I don't see where it says presets. That's why.
Presets should be a button right here next to your output window. You can see my mouse, right?
I can see your mouse, yeah, but those pictures on that are so small that I really can't see.
Okay. Did you download the file?
No, I have it on. I'm looking at it online.
Okay, well, like I said, you can download that and you can probably zoom in a little bit better. But there are two buttons up there. One says you want to add a setting, and the other one is a presets button. It's the one that's not green.
Okay, I'll figure it out.
Well, you have the window open, right?
I do, yes.
Okay, so there should be add setting at the top, right? On the top left.
I see render.
So
I guess
do you have the output window open here?
I had it open. I'm trying to find it.
So you've already added in your EXR, your high resolution,
I did, yes.
anti-aliasing. All right, so in that window at the very top, next to the green plus where it says settings, there's a little button that's grayed out that says presets.
Okay,
Do you see it?
yes, I see it now.
You have to click on that.
All right, I see it. Thank you.
Okay, good. All right, any other questions? Make sense? All right, so let's set up Arnold. Which one should I demo, the rabbit or the still life? Okay, we got a still life. Still life. All right, well, let me demo that. The rabbit is pretty much the same process. Well, let's do the still life. All right, so let me minimize my window here. Julio, I muted you because the mic was still on. Hopefully I didn't permanently mute you.
Thanks. No, you didn't permanently.
Okay, good. All right, so let's go take a look at project 4 here. And all right, let me get rid of this. That was last month. Let's get rid of that. All right, so I got the still life. Get rid of all my renders. Okay. So let me set my project. I've already renamed my project folder to project 4. So let me verify everything's shut off except for Zoom, my email, and Keynote. All right, so I'm going to set my project. Always set your project. Let's open up the still life. And looks like my lighting's in there. Let's render it out, see what we get. I'm only rendering in Arnold render view to make sure my lighting's there. There we go. All right, good enough. That looks like it works. Going to do a save as. All right, so just trying to save it as a binary. I have an ASCII file. Whatever your native format is, save it in whatever you have. Okay. So got it set up. Let's bring up the doc. All right, so I set my project. I need to download the RenderCam file. So still life, anim, RenderCam. Let's download that. It is just a Maya scene file. So that goes into my project folder. Here's my project folder. Just drag it in there. And let's follow what's going on here. All right, so I downloaded it. I've got it in there. And I want to import that RenderCam, the anim RenderCam, using the following import options. Now, it's really important to use the import options because if you don't, it will create the file name, put a colon, and any node that's inside that file, like the camera, will get another name inside of there. It's like adding a double name. Yes. I put it in my scenes folder of my project. Yes. This way, everything's in the same location. So when I go to import, it should find that location since I've got my project set. All right. So first thing, file, import, use the options box. And down here under options, you want to make sure that you uncheck use namespaces, unchecked. You want to resolve clashing nodes. You don't want it to try and resolve every node that's in there. Only nodes that have the same name as anything in your scene already. And since we're bringing in a render or an animated render cam, it's not going to have the same name. I made sure not to name them the same. But in the future, if you get this from somebody else and you do have something with the same name, it will put the file name with the camera name and bring them both in. It's a little bit of a pain, but it's a safeguard. So you want to resolve clashing nodes with the file name. Hit import. And I want to find my still life anim render cam right here. Now, before I import, let me hit cancel. Notice I've just got the traditional render cam and all the usual nodes. So now let's import options. Okay, make sure that's all unchecked. Hit import. There's my animated render cam. Continue. So now it brought in a new camera. That new camera is what I want to look through. So to look through a camera, in the viewport, go to Panels, Perspective. There's my new animated camera. You'll see down here at the bottom, my timeline, it's got frames, or I should say it's got keys set. And it did not need to add the file name onto it. So let me hit save. Now that I've got it brought in, let's set it up to render. So this timeline area that we're going to set up is very similar to what we just did in Unreal. We're going to set it up so the start is at 0, or sorry, for Maya, you want the start to be at 1 and the last frame to be at 70. So down here, you want to make sure frame 1, this is the start of the animation. This is the playback range. Over here, this is the end. So I want my playback range and the animation to be the same. So now when I hit the playback button, I should get the camera movement. All right, so now we want to set up, not really to batch render, but to render sequence. Well, technically we are setting up in Maya. It's just that when we go to render it, it's going to be using Maya's viewport or Maya's render view. All right, so under Common, File Output, we're going to bring up the render settings. Common, you want to give it a name. So I'm going to call this Still Life. Okay, EXR, which it's already set at. We're going to make sure zip compression tiled. And we also want to make sure we turn on merge AOVs. This part's really important because if you don't have this turned on, you're not going to get the denoise information for Arnold to use to denoise it. All right, so far, top part good. Now we want to go under metadata, use output transform, and then we want to change from being a single frame to being name.number.extension. So what that will do is give me still life. In fact, you can see it up top here. Still life.1, which is the frame number, .exr. Now, underneath, under frame padding, right now it's set up to be 1. That means it's only allowing 1 digit for the frame number, which is kind of silly considering it does show me that it's 10 up here. But I want to add, I like to add 3 or 4. Like if you noticed, Unreal had 4 digits there. It had like 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 2. You can go 3 or 4. 4 is usually pretty standard. So what it'll do is throw still life.0001.exr, still life.0002. And this way you've got enough for 1,000 plus frames. So it says 3 here. You know what? I'll just go by 3. What the heck? We got 3. Now I want my start frame to be 1 and my end to be 70. This is very similar to what we set up in the output settings in Unreal. You want to go by frame 1, or yeah, by frame, you want it to go frame by frame. You don't want to skip any frames. Now down here under renderable cameras, you'll notice since we imported a camera, it added another camera into our renderable cameras here. You must get rid of the original render cam down here in the list, because if not, guess what? You'll do 70 frames of the render cam or the animated camera, and then it'll go back and do 70 frames of the non-animated camera. So that's a lot of waste. You want to get rid of that extra camera by clicking on the icon of the trash can next to it. It didn't delete the camera, it just deleted it out of that list. That make sense? Questions? Wait, say that again? Yeah, that's what we just went over. Oh, yeah, you just want to, it's whatever one you're not using. So it should be the original render cam. And if you're doing the Cornell Rabbit, yours would be the CR Anim render cam. I'm doing the still life, so it's SL Anim render cam. So that's the only one you want to have set up, yes. All right, so image size, just verify it should be HD 540. And we're set to go. Oh, wait, a couple more things. Arnold renderer. You want to set this up for the production quality render you had set. Last but not least, under AOVs, this part's really important. You must turn on output denoising AOVs, or when you're done rendering and use or try to use that denoiser, it's not going to have anything to denoise. That information has to get written into each frame. So that gets turned on. Make sure you save your scene file in case anything happens. All right, so now, in order to render this, we can't use the Arnold render view. We have to use Maya's render view. Maya's render view is up here in this little tool set where we've got render settings, IPR. It looks like a little eyeball. It's the same eyeball icon as Arnold, except it's got that little clapper that they use to mark scene and name and time and take number. So this is Maya's render view. You must use that. All right, so far so good. So go to Maya's render view. We can go to the render menu. Well, let's not jump the gun here. So you have to open up Maya's render view and it'll just say render view. You'll notice it says Arnold renderer, which is good. Under render, you want to go down to the bottom where it says render sequence with the options box. Make sure in the render options, the current camera is set to be your animated render cam. It should be there by default. Okay, so far so good. Next, whoops, let's go back to Maya. It says render sequence. It'll tell you the frame number at the top here. You want to click on the render sequence and close button. Now, don't be upset because this is going to take quite a while to render. And it's going to look like nothing is happening. And then it'll start to kick in. This is not going to denoise. Now, also don't be upset if you don't actually see anything. It looks pure white or pure black. Just let it go. What's that? Yeah, it's the process. And also it's not really worried about displaying for you what it's doing because it's a sequence. It's just kind of, well, honestly, I don't know why they have that because down at the bottom, it gives you a status which has almost nothing to do with what's going on in your render. Now, I'm going to let this go through for maybe 2 frames because that's long enough. Just so you get the idea. When it is done rendering this frame, it may pause a second and then start the next one. Now, the only good thing about doing this is you can actually go inside your images folder in your project folder and see the frames as they finish. So right now, this all looks blank and a lot of people panic and they go, it's not working. I had to quit out and start again, but it's still the same thing. Just let it go. All right, so here's my images. All right, so right now it's only 4K. That's because it is still rendering. Like I said, don't worry that it doesn't look like anything. It's going to take a couple of seconds. So it still says rendering, still says frame 1, just let it go. Talk nice to Maya. All right, so that's frame 1, and it should start frame 2 pretty soon. There we go. So that means frame 1 is completely written and should be inside my images folder. So here it is, actually viewable. The next one, it's being written, though it's going to take a little bit of time. Right, does that make sense? Questions? Now, if you have a question? Because you really shouldn't be doing anything while you're rendering. This is going to be a hog. Yeah, it's not like you can render and then go off and work somewhere. Yeah, no, this is Maya, this is old school, this is brute force. Yes, I'm glad you asked that. So I'm going to pretend that I've got all my renders done. So to cancel a render, if you realize like, oh crap, I forgot to do this. So inside the render view, make sure you highlight it and hit the escape key. Give it a couple seconds. It should stop, and then you should be able to close the render view. Now, let me go back here. There we go. All right, so I've only got 2 frames done. Like I said, I'm going to pretend all my frames are done. And let me pull these in. And let me paste these in. There we go. All right, now, like I said, I'm pretending all my frames are done. Once you are done, now we have to run the denoiser on all the frames. So what's going to happen is we need to go to the Arnold menu, to Utilities, to the Arnold denoiser noise. This is a little standalone, not standalone, it's got to run inside of Maya, but it's a little app that runs inside of Maya. So input, this is where you find your first frame. So I set my project, so it's actually found my frames. It's going to go inside your images folder first. I'm going to select the very first frame, hit select. Under output, don't change the output, leave it. You want those denoised frames to go back into the same folder. All right, so frame range, you want start and end. You want to start at frame 1, end at frame 70. And this is where you set up all those denoise settings that we had automatically inside the Arnold render view. So the only difference here is the variance is set at 0.3 by default. You can set it at 0.25, which I recommend. It's not going to be quite as blurry. If you hit enter, it's going to round it up to 0.3, but it is going to use 0.25. So pixel search radius at 9, pixel patch radius at 3. Those are all the settings we use all the time. They're fine. Don't worry about light groups. We haven't done any light groups at all. So now, if all went well, we should be able to click the denoise button, and it should start denoising the frames for me. So this is going to take about 20 seconds or so per frame. Right now, I'm up to frame 3. So if I want to look, I could probably sneak a peek inside. Yep, here they are. They're starting to pop in. You can see as they finish, they're going to drop in. All right, does that make sense? Now, when it's all done, should be able to just close the window. So rather than make you guys wait for all these frames to denoise, I'm just going to hit cancel. And I'm going to pretend that all my frames are done. And basically, let me drop these in. All right, so got them all done. Yay. Save your Maya scene file. And now we're going to take it into After Effects just like we did the Unreal stuff. Except I'm going to quit out of Maya because Maya and Unreal, or sorry, Maya and After Effects are memory hogs. What's that? Yes, they do. Just like Photoshop and Maya. All right, so we're going to use almost the same settings. We're going to go new project, new composition from footage, and all this is in the directions. I want to navigate to where my project folder is. And I'm going to select the first denoised frame. Don't accidentally select the other frames, because what it's going to do is take all the denoised frames, that whole frame range, and bring them in. So same deal. I can play it, hitting space bar. I basically want to add a new text layer. I can navigate, or not navigate, but move it around under transform. Change my opacity. Save. You want to save it? All right. Give me 1 second, guys. I'll be right back. Sorry about that. Okay, back. Sorry about the delay. Okay. So back. Sorry about the delay, like I said. So once we've got the movie done, got the watermark on it, we're set to, well, obviously you want to save it out. I like to save it with my frames again. That way, if I have to open it up and play around with it later on, re-render it for whatever reason, I can do that. Just make sure everything works. And basically, The only real difference between this and the Unreal Bunny Burn is going to be we're using a different ProRes codec. So once that's all set, we need to add it or actually export it to the render queue. And we want to change next to output module, you want to click lossless. That'll bring up the output module settings. Don't forget, if you're on a PC, change the format from AVI to QuickTime. Under format options, you want to change the video codec to Apple ProRes 4444. Triple or quadruple fours. Click OK. Turn the audio off. If you forget that, nothing bad will happen. It just, there's no audio, so why calculate for it? Click OK. Next, just choose the location where you want that MOV file to go. So I always like to stick it back in, again, with my frames and my project. And I don't always like the choice of names. Oh, 09, click save, and then click the render button. When it's done, it'll kind of give you a very kind of woody sounding xylophone sound. And then check your movie files. Before you quit out of After Effects. All right, there we go. So like I said, the workflow in After Effects is identical except for the codec. Does that make sense? The hardest part, again, is going to be waiting and having all the patience with Arnold, because that is going to take quite a while. All right. Any questions? Julio, any questions? AJ, any questions?
No, sir.
Okay. AJ, any questions? All right, so this is a good time to take a break. We'll come back. We'll take a short 20-minute break. It'll give me a chance to render out lecture. I hope it's only one part, considering we had that little Wi-Fi blip. Come back, we can do some troubleshooting for anybody who's got issues. And we'll treat it like a lab. So let's see, what time is it? It's like 10 of. Let's come back at, let me make sure I give you the right time this time to come back. So let's come back at 3:10. That sounds about right, 20 minutes. All right.
Professor,
Yes, sir.
question. In the watermark on Adobe Effects, once I've gotten it all written down, I've got the opacity right. How do I center it? I can't.
You down there, it's under the transforms, just like opacity. And there should be a position. It's X and Y.
Oh, I see it. Thank you so much.
Yep, no problem. All right, see you guys in 20 minutes.